Have you ever wondered why Cyberpunk, a game about a dystopian world filled with neon skylines, spectacular gunfights and cutscenes, all taking place in a giant metropolis that never sleeps, begins with the protagonist contemplating themselves in a mirror? Regardless of the background you choose, be it a nomad returning to the city, a corpo making their way to the top, or a street kid knowing their way around crime, you begin the game in a modest manner, one that's easy to overlook. But this introduction is the first step in Cyberpunk's long journey into its central theme, identity. Sure, it could just be a way to show V's face, but a story this big wouldn't open on a mirror by accident. That first mirror is, in fact, an invitation, not just to see how V looks, but to confront who V is and who they might become. In art, mirrors are rarely neutral objects, they're portals, introspections, revelations. Just consider the nomad background and how the mirror doesn't recognize V's ID, displaying user unknown on it. The detail already says a lot about V's former nomadic life, free from society, but ultimately in dire need of recognition, revealed by V's desire to become a legend.
Guess dying's a small price to pay for going down in history.
Already there, in those first few seconds in front of a mirror, Cyberpunk tells us so much about V and the world we're about to enter. Every detail matters, every hint is yet another clue from the developers, giving us a better understanding of their dystopian world. In truth, the mirror is a recurring motif throughout the game, with some of its most powerful moments taking place in front of a mirror. These scenes appear at crucial times during V's storyline, symbolizing V's rise but also their downfall in Night City. In total, there are 3 significant scenes involving a mirror during the main story. The first one, as I mentioned, takes place at the very beginning of the game, right after having created our character and started a new save. This is not a coincidence. The game starts with V's body being split into 2, located both where they stand and in the mirror. Considering how central the theme of the double is in the game, it comes as no surprise that the developers gave a subtle nod by using a mirror, already showing V's doubling identity from the get-go. That split identity of V actually begins with the player choosing their life path in the character creation screen, as that path determines much about V's dialogue options in the game and their overall backstory. The 3 options offered to the player inherently involve a divide between different types of V, a protagonist whose particularity is to be a predetermined character, whose personality and traits are already defined by the developers, but with some leeway regarding their pasts, which the player can decide. As a result, Nomad V is both similar to and different from Corpo or Street Kid V, implying that V is a predetermined character with some unique features shaped by the player. Just like with Johnny's engram invading V's body and thus splitting V into 2, the mirror highlights a first disparity the moment the player shaped some aspects of the protagonists. But the introductions have much more to offer once we scrutinize each of them for more clues. Starting with the Street Kid 1, the mirror helps us see that V is wearing a tank top, contrasting drastically with the suit from the Corpo intro, while having a rugged face with a broken nose. In a second, we understand everything there is about V's background, be it the violence they partake in, the rough life in Night City streets, and the social places they go to, like the shanty bar behind them. Notice how the first few seconds presents V looking at their hand and a bartender who offers them a shot. But V neither looks at the bartender nor the people around. Instead, they look straight into the mirror. The latter offers a much needed context about V and their past story, which stands literally behind them. Let me clarify. By default, the mirror displays the protagonist, but also what's located behind them, which symbolically can represent their past before the player came in, that past being spent on the streets and in rough bars. The same goes for the Corpo intro, whose wide, pristine mirror contrasts with the small, dirty one we just saw. Here, V wears an expensive suit, and the tall, cold walls all around leave no doubt that they are located within a big, rich corporation, more precisely, within Arasaka. We can also observe, on the bottom left, a small text explaining that the mirror can only be used by 5th class officers, which V must be. In addition, the absence of any real music in a bathroom, V vomiting, and the fact that they talk to Jackie via the net and not in person show how cold, heartless the corporal life is compared to the Street Kid path or even the Nomad path. The latter contains yet another dirty mirror V cleans up a bit, revealing a car behind them which represents nomad life. before V looks at their patch and removes it, casting that life away. In all these intros, the mirror is a narrative tool, but it is puzzling to see it being placed by the developers right at the beginning of the game, instead of at the end when the time for introspection is ripe. That decision has to do with the mirror as a strong, complex symbol. For the psychiatrist Jacques Lacan, humans build their sense of self through what he calls the mirror stage. This stage coincides with the moment children recognize themselves in the mirror, which, in turn, makes them understand themselves not as the center of the world, but as objects that can be viewed from an outside perspective. To put it simply, it's the idea that children recognize their body as something that is part of the world, among other objects. In a way, the mirror stage represents a split within the subjectivity of the child, who never thought that they were an object among others, but rather the center of the world. The mirror acts as a dissociation, a detachment of someone's mind from their representation. It follows then that Cyberpunk's first scene uses a mirror to highlight a split between the body and the mind, but also within V. Doing so allows the game to subtly convey the fact that the moment the player takes control, a split happens in V, whose personality is invaded by us, players, and soon after by Johnny. And while V is not a child, the game still offers a form of infancy, in that the mirror scene is the first one of the game, and as such, represents the early stage of the story, its infancy, if you will. The second time a mirror appears in the game comes shortly after the first scene, as it coincides with the end of the introduction. The cutscene shows Jackie and V becoming partners, spending months together, taking on one mercenary contract after another, with all the excitement and danger their lives are about. The montage occurs over a minute or so, during which we see glimpses of some of their adventures in Night City. In it, we see a first mirror when V moves in with Jackie. V appears gloomy for a brief second there, likely because their expectations of making it big in Night City are crushed when having to move in with their partner, and to do so above his mother's apartment. The second time comes right after receiving a rough beating in a nightclub. V pulls out a tooth from their mouth and looks determined to change things up. Which is why the last time we see a mirror in this sequence is when V leaves Jackie's place to find their own apartment, looking at themselves with contentment, presumably proud of what they have achieved. These brief scenes show V's growth over the course of several months spent gaining some reputation, starting low and defeated, becoming determined, and finally beating the odds. Once again, the mirror showcases V's identity and their development. The V we see here is no longer the same one we started the game with, having successfully gained some fame. As a recurring motif, the mirror embodies the passage of time and the different stages of V's life. All that said, the last and most important mirror scene in the game takes place during the climax, the heist mission, in which Jackie and V have to retrieve a biochip from the Arasaka Tower. Of course, things go wrong when they witness Yorinobu Arasaka kill his father, and when they are subsequently framed for it. Jackie dies while trying to escape, and V reports what happened to Dexter, the man who employed him. Upon arriving, Dexter is clearly agitated and worried about Saburo Arasaka's death, despite the fact that V and Jackie didn't kill anyone. Calming down, Dexter asks V to go to the bathroom and wash their blood-covered face. When the mirror activates, V's face is clearly filled with rage and sadness. The player has a few options. We can either wash our face and leave the bathroom, or smash the mirror, or both. Regardless of the option we choose here, V's posture and demeanor both embody a turning point. Everything V built for themselves is now gone. Gone just like Jackie, just like their dreams of making it big in a city. If we decide to wash V's face, nothing in their expression changes, and the mirror keeps showing V's anger. Without a mirror in the room, the player might assume that V has successfully calmed down after cleaning their face. But thanks to V's reflection, we can see that from now on, there's no cleaning things up. Nothing will ever be the same after Jackie's death and after the insertion of Johnny's engram into V, whose consequences will slowly unfold as the game goes on. On the other hand, if we choose to smash the mirror, then the scene becomes even more powerful. V releases their anger, and in doing so, symbolically shatters their identity and sense of self. And I also mean this literally, as V leaves the bathroom and is betrayed by Dexter, who shoots them. While Johnny's engram allows V to survive, it comes at a heavy price. Johnny is now part of V, and will begin to take control of their body bit by bit. The shattered mirror then marks the moment V dies and is reborn as something else, whose identity is a fusion of two beings, V and Johnny. In effect, the broken mirror epitomizes the truth of V's individuality, now shattered in two pieces, and whose reflection is a lie, since the body reflected there belongs to two conflicting minds. The scene with Dexter and its climax happens relatively early in the game, and yet there are no more significant mirror scenes later on. So why do important mirror scenes only appear in the early game, especially given how this recurring motif so effectively captures V's transformation? Simply put, from that moment on, Johnny becomes the mirror. He is V's double, their reflection, their counterparts, accompanying them until the very end. And that is also literally the case, considering how, when randomly checking mirrors in the game from time to time, Johnny may appear in a reflection instead of V. In a game so focused on identity and the self, the double becomes a central figure. Sigmund Freud once described the double as frightening, because it can threaten the integrity of the self, even signal death, the death of the original being overtaken. Both similar and different, the double constantly menaces any stable identity. It follows then that the presence of Johnny in the game, combined with the player's choice of V's background, gradually fractures V's fixed identity. The developers found a brilliant way to retain the foundations of the protagonists they wrote, while letting that protagonist evolve through the player's influence. Neither truly one nor the other, V's identity remains in flux until the very end, culminating in the infamous choice the player must make, not just for V, but for Johnny as well. If Cyberpunk is a story about V, then it's about V's evolution, shaped not only by narrative events, but by the player's choices, which inherently mold who the protagonist becomes. In brief, the mirror symbolizes a fundamental tension in video games between the player's input and the developer's intent. While Cyberpunk may tell a story about the dangers of technology and corporate control, its use of the mirror turns the experience inward. It becomes an introspective work, one that recognizes games as an alliance between the character we see on screen and the one we play. Last but not least, the end of Cyberpunk 2077 presents something striking. In each of its possible conclusions, the game shifts perspective, from first person to third. After spending dozens of hours inside V's head, seeing the world through their eyes, we're suddenly pulled out. The camera pans back, and for the first time, we see V from the outside. This shift is quiet, but momentous, and I can't help but feel that it mirrors, quite literally, the mirror scenes at the start of the game. In those early moments, V gazes at their reflection, already split between multiple identities, the V written by the developers, the V shaped by the player's decisions, and the upcoming presence of Johnny Silverhand. But now, at the end, that doubling is reversed. The player sees V not as an avatar or vessel, but as a person breaking away. The camera no longer places us behind V's eyes, but at a distance, watching them, not as part of them. After hours of shaping them, making decisions for them, speaking through them, we are finally met with a version of V that no longer needs us. The close-up shots in the final cutscenes, no matter which ending we get, show V being the reflection now, almost looking back at us one last time before stepping out of reach. It's a subtle but powerful gesture. The game began with V confronting their reflection, unsure of who they were. It ends with us confronting V, realizing they've become someone we no longer control. The mirror has turned, and now it's a player who is being watched. Cyberpunk has a heavy, complicated history. Its development was long, and its release was nothing short of catastrophic. And yet, years later, we cannot help but acknowledge the brilliance of its world, its story, and its framing. In fact, it's rather poetic that the game went through a long process of introspection before getting better, just like V, standing in front of a mirror, forced to reckon with a fractured sense of self before carrying on. Like V, the game had to confront what it was, and like V, it emerged changed. Starting such a colossal game like Cyberpunk with a mirror is fascinating because it doesn't give any answers, rather, it sparks questions. This reflection forces the player to ponder over who V is, but also, and most importantly, who they will become under our control. CD Projekt Red could have opened with a sweeping panorama of Night City, the game's crown jewel that so many consider its highlight, but instead they chose something quieter, more intimate, and far more daring, a mirror. That choice tells us everything. This isn't just a game about the city or the future or the spectacle, it's a game about a person, about becoming, about transformation, and from that very first moment, we're not being told who V is, we're being asked to decide. Not just as players, but as participants in an identity that is always shifting, always unstable, shaped by story, by choice, and by reflection. The mirror is not just a visual motif, it's a thematic key. It opens up questions about selfhood and the strange, shifting relationship between a player and their character. And just like that mirror at the beginning, Cyberpunk offers no clear answers, only a place to look, and someone looking back. So when we talk about what makes this game's introduction so special, maybe it's the fact that when we boot it up, we're not stepping into a fantasy, we're stepping into a question, one that only gets deeper the longer we stare. Thank you for having looked into Cyberpunk's mirror with me. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and liking the video. I'll see you in the next one.